in the same. Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we should probably get started. Like I said, I can see the numbers still rising rapidly. We're expecting a lot of people on the call today, but we should get underway. I'm part of the partnerships team at Google, but we're actually welcoming a bunch of different audiences on the call today. The main group being members of the GDG AI for Science, and I'll hand over to one of our organisers of that group in a second. We've also got a bunch of Googlers on the call, many of whom are members of our internal Science Catalyst community. And then we're also co-hosting this call with GDG Sydney, GDG Cloud Sydney, GDG Auckland, and GDG Melbourne. So yeah, a bunch of different folks dialing in today. Just before we get started, and I'll remind everyone about this again. I'll remind everyone about this again in a second, well, when we get to the Q&A, but everyone's dialing in either through a live stream today or you've only got view rights today. So you won't, we just given the number of people on the call, it won't be particularly interactive, but you will be able to ask questions through the Q&A feature in Google Meet. So for those of you not familiar with Google Meet, if you have a look in the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a little cluster of shapes in the corner there. If you click on that, it'll open up the activities panel, and one of the options there is Q&A. And if you click on that, that'll be where you can ask a question. So you can start firing through your questions at any point, and they'll be you can also vote on other people's questions, and we'll take the top voted questions at the end, time permitting. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you, Pablo, at ANU to do the intro.
Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Pablo Larronda, and I'm one of the organizers of this GDG for Science. So it's a new group that we've been recently new, so we've been operating for the last months. And yeah, I'm based here at the ANU. If there's anyone connecting from the ANU, please come to the Agri-Food Institute. We're here in a room. There's still room, so it'll be great to see you. And very excited also about the talk today. NotebookLM is something that I use quite often. I think it's very, very useful for summarizing and going through research. So very excited of having Stephen Johnson that will tell us today about what is new and what is coming and some tips about how to use it. So Stephen is editorial director of NotebookLM and Google Labs. And also he's a very prolific author with more than 13 books, I think. That's what I set up. Maybe there's more now. And also very active in TV podcasts with many contributions in that space. So very excited to having you, Stephen, and looking forward to hear more about NotebookLM.
Great. Thank you, Pablo. Great to see all of you. I'm going to take over the screen here and should be, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so this is really fun. I love talking about this product. And I'm going to give you a little introduction, a little bit of my backstory of how I got to it, a little introduction of the product, and I'm going to go into a bunch of different demos of different use cases in kind of the general research and a little bit of educator space. And then we'll have time to go through all the questions at the end. So thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody turning out for this. So as Pablo mentioned, I've had a kind of interesting route to Google. I have spent most of my career researching and writing books and TV shows and podcasts. These are some of them. They're 14 now, so you were close, Pablo. And all of them nonfiction, many of them on science. The history of science, the history of technology and innovation. And I have, through that career, like I've always been very interested in the tools I was using to help me research those books and to put together my thoughts and make new discoveries as part of the research process, and then actually writing the books. And so I've always been kind of an early adopter of new tools. And this is an obsession of mine that actually like goes way back actually to old timers here may remember this. When I was in college, this program HyperCard came out that Apple put out in like 1987, sophomore year of college for me. And it was this very like visionary program that you could kind of organize your own notes and things like that. And I got obsessed with it, and it kind of planted this seed in my mind of using software to help, in a sense, augment my thinking and my memory. And so I was always kind of an early adopter of tools, and I started writing about the tools that I was using. And it actually shows up in a couple of books. Like I wrote a book called Where Good Ideas Come From, and I talked about like how I, in a sense, have this kind of dialogue with the software where I've saved all my research in there, and I can ask questions way before language models, but trying to like push the technology as far in the direction of what would eventually become language models. So I had a little bit of a reputation for thinking about life on the kind of cutting edge of research software. And then in the spring of 2022, I wrote a 10,000 word article for the New York Times Magazine about these new language models that were so interesting. And at the time, it was a very controversial piece. It was basically arguing that we needed to take this technology very seriously, and it was, while it was still in its infancy, it was going to be maybe the most significant revolution in technology of my lifetime. And there were a couple of folks at Google Labs, Clay Babor and Josh Woodward, who now runs Labs, who had read my books over the years. They knew about my obsession with research tools and writing tools, and they read this article and they thought, well, maybe we could reach out to Stephen and see if he would be willing to help kind of basically build the tool that he has been dreaming of since he was a sophomore in college, powered by this amazing new technology of large language models. And so they basically kind of cold called me out of the blue and sent me an email and said, hey, you don't know us, but can we talk to you about this idea? And they proposed that I come part-time to Labs, and that we'd have a little dedicated team, and we would build a little prototype based on pretty much my research techniques and intuition about how this stuff could work. And because I am not an idiot, I said, yes, I would like to do that. Sounds like a great idea. And that 50% time collaboration quickly became like 150% time thing. And I'm now amazingly a full-time employee here at Google. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and NotebookLM is now in 180 plus countries around the world. And it has become a big part of Google's AI strategy. So it's been an amazing ride. Very excited about what we're doing. And we have a lot of exciting things coming this year. But I think with the product is now, it's been a bunch of times in kind of experimental mode and kind of early prototype mode, but now I think it is really, it is a very useful tool right now, and it's going to get more useful over the next couple of months and years. Now fully available, by the way, as part of Cloud, of Workspace, So it is a part of the whole Google suite of tools. We have come to think of it as a tool for understanding things. That's the way we describe it. And increasingly for like taking that understanding and turning it into things that you can share with other people. But just as you think about like a word processor as a tool for organizing words and sentences in a document, and a Photoshop is a tool for pushing pixels around in an image, Notebook is a tool for making sense of complex material. And so everything in the product is designed to help you do that. It is really like a true like kind of thought partner for the work that you're doing. There are a couple of things that you need to understand to just like get the basic philosophy of the product, and the most important thing is that it's all built around this concept that we call source grounding. Sometimes known, a variant of it is RAG. For those of you who follow the AI world, we think that source grounding is a lot better way to put it. The idea is instead of just having an open-ended conversation with a model that is, effectively been trained on a large corpus of information, when you are interacting with NotebookLM, you are always having a conversation with a model that is grounded in the documents that you have given it. So that could be the scientific papers that you are using for a particular research project. It could be the novel you're writing. It could be interview transcripts for a research report you're generating. Whatever documents are relevant to you. You basically create a new notebook, as I'll show you, and you load it up with these sources, and I'll explain the different types that we support and things like that. And at that point, all the model's answers will be kind of grounded in the factual, like ground truth of those documents. And this is really important for a couple of reasons. One, it greatly reduces the risk of hallucination. You really can feel confident in the answers you're getting. It also helps you personalize, right? Like a general interest model knows a lot about just about everything, but it doesn't know anything about the project that you're working on. And it doesn't know anything about the like specific documents that you need to do your job at work, or the project you're researching, whatever it is. So this allows you to essentially create an AI, partner that is a kind of domain expert in the thing that you're doing. And that just changes everything about the way that you work. And so this has become a slightly more commonplace idea in AI. When we started, this was like the first thing we built in July of 2022. When I got on the job there, we like gave it a piece of one of my books, and we were trying to get the model to like answer factually based on the material. So that has been like a core part of this product from the very beginning. And we built it into like a lot of the features. Like maybe one of the 2 or 3 things that we do the best is we have this inline citation system that is really state of the art. And I'll show you some of this because it's so important for the research workflow. But basically all your answers have these little inline citations, and you can see exactly the specific passages from your sources that the model used to answer your questions, which is just, so important in both exploring the material, but also in just making sure it's factually accurate and feeling confident about that. So citations are a big part of that. We have this new UI that we just rolled out in December that we're really excited about. We call it the 3-panel UI. And I'll walk you through this in more detail, but basically the left panel is where you keep all your sources. So that is the kind of knowledge base that you want the AI to have to help you with whatever you're doing. The center space is where you have your chat to kind of converse and explore. And the right-hand side is this really cool new area we've created called Studio, where you can generate kind of new outputs based on your sources. And this is where our feature audio overviews, which kind of went viral in the fall of last year. We have audio overviews there, but there's some other tools there and more coming. And we'll talk about that in the demo. It is fully multimodal and multilingual. It's fluent in about 100 languages. You can upload documents in Japanese and have a conversation in Spanish about them. This little illustration here is the great biographer Walter Isaacson is using Notebook to write a biography of Marie Curie. And this is a scan of her handwritten French lab notes that are like 120 years old. And you can put that into Notebook, and you can see the summary that it does there. The source details in French, some of Marie Curie's research on pitch blend. Curie describes the procedures. It just is, it's not been OCR'd at all. This is just like a bunch of pixels that we're showing the model. It's translating from French and English. It's figuring out that it's Marie Curie because it says Curie in the corner of it. And it understands basically from these little scribbles what's going on. So it's really unbelievable that it can do stuff like that. There's that. And then let's switch into demo mode, and I'll show you a bunch of cool things with a bunch of different kind of use cases that I think are representative. So I'm going to start with a notebook I've created that is a collection of interviews from the NASA Oral History project, which actually is made up of like hundreds of interviews with astronauts and flight directors and other people involved in the NASA program. I've taken, what are there, 7 or 8 there. And you can see that these interviews are here in this source panel here on the left-hand side. If I wanted to add a source, I would open up the source panel and I can upload. I have a couple of different options here. So it supports PDF, text files, markdown files, just raw audio, Google Docs, Google Slides, websites, YouTube videos with transcripts. We don't actually analyze the raw video, so it has to have a transcript attached to it, and just pasted text. So those are the source types, more types coming. You can imagine some of the ones that are on our list. But we want you to be able to put basically anything in there, and then you can kind of make sense of it. In one notebook, a normal user can have 50 sources, and each source can be up to about 500,000 words long. So you can effectively, just in the free version of this product, you can be talking to 25 million words of text, which is kind of insane. This is actually, you're seeing here Notebook Plus, which is our new premium version, which we just rolled out, that you can get through various different packages, including Google One's AI premium package. And with Notebook Plus, you can have up to 300 sources in your notebooks, and there are higher limits for a lot of different other things as well. So here I've brought in these sources, and what's really, one of the things that's really crucial about the design of this product that also we've prioritized from the beginning is that you can always see the original sources. So if I click there, I'm going to get a kind of a summary of this source. I'm going to get some key topics here, which are clickable if you want to explore. But importantly, I can just read through the entire document. So you can see how kind of long this one transcript is. I think in this notebook I have maybe it's like 250,000 words worth of just raw interview transcripts. So you can always go in and read the original document. It's never kind of hidden away somewhere. One of the things that's incredibly important to know about Notebook is we are never training the model on the information you give it. So this is a really important idea. That it may seem as though you're interacting with a model that is trained on your information, but that's not actually what's happening. All we are doing is taking the information that you've uploaded in your sources and putting it in what's called the context window of the model. And the context window, for those of you who aren't following all the details of this, a very important part of AI actually, is essentially like the short-term memory of the model. So it has this kind of long-term memory of everything it learned in its training. In a short-term memory, we kind of put the information you've given, and then we say, answer the user's questions or follow the user's instructions based on this information we're giving you right now. And when you're done with your session, that information is wiped from the model's memory, so it can't, kind of leak into other users' interactions. And it allows you to work with material that's under copyright. So if you have the right to read something on your computer, you can use it inside of NotebookLM and not be worried about the model somehow learning from that copyrighted material and using it in some kind of exploitative way with other users. So that's a very key thing. You should feel confident about, inputting information. That if you feel confident about having Google store stuff for you in Google Drive, you should feel good about NotebookLM storing and using information that you add to a notebook. So those are the sources. And then let me give you a couple of examples of what you can do. So one of the things that you often want to do when you're at this kind of early research stage is just go through this process of just figuring out like what is in this material. Like you want the kind of like before you start diving into the like really complex questions, you want to get kind of a bird's eye view of this. And so we give you a lot of ways to do that. Obviously, we create this summary at the beginning that just kind of gives you the overview of all the sources. But if you open the studio panel over here, I'm going to close the source panel. We have a couple of different things here. We have the audio overviews, which will create, if those of you who haven't heard this, a shockingly realistic AI podcast style conversation between two virtual hosts discussing the material. Their task is to find the most interesting information and ideas and concepts from the material and convey them to you in an engaging conversation that you can listen to on the train ride or while working out at the gym. I'm going to give you just a little sample of this. This is the one based again on these NASA reports. I believe you will be able to hear this. Just flag if you can't, but I think you can hear this.
You know, when we think about those early astronauts, it's easy to just picture them as almost superhuman.
Yeah.
But you've sent us this incredible collection of NASA oral histories.
Right.
Interviews with icons like Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, even Gene Kranz from Mission Control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this deep dive is going to really show us the people under the helmets.
You know what's so compelling about these oral histories is that they reveal how much the astronauts' pre-NASA experiences really shaped their journeys.
Okay.
We often think about astronauts as being like...
Okay, so I mean, it goes on for 18 minutes like that. They'll talk about different stories. They'll pick out things. I mean, it's kind of nuts. You can slightly customize them. There's a customize when you generate an audio overview. They take about 4 or 5 minutes to generate. So I pre-generated there, but you will see a kind of customize option. So you can give some instructions about what you want to do. And there's a new interactive mode, which I won't show you now, but like you can actually like interrupt the conversation and ask a question. And they'll be like, oh, we have a question from a listener. And they'll answer the question. It's kind of nuts. So a lot of fun. You can download those and share them. So that's one way in to get like a kind of a sense of like what's in this material at a kind of like high level. We also have these really useful, we call them drafts, that are kind of one-click formats that will go through all your sources and generate a document then that you can look at. So one of the good ones to start with is briefing doc. So you click that and it's going to generate this kind of new note down here. And it'll take, I don't know, maybe about 10 seconds to do this. And then it's going to basically do a text version of the audio overviews, like find the key themes and ideas and turn it into a document that you can read. So you'll see here if we just pull this up. So here's the briefing document. It's got an overview. It's got key themes and ideas. It's got quotes from the individual astronauts. So it's gone through and like kind of broken it up into the like main topics. And it'll go through, I mean, it's quite a long document. So this is just, you know, a really great way to get a kind of like top level view of the material. Another thing that's incredibly important for researchers and particularly for people in the humanities is timeline. So this, like, if you've ever worked on a complex chronological like research thing, that is such a pain in the ass to actually like try and build a chronology of all the events and keep track of it. The timeline feature in there just did it in like 15 seconds. It's gone through all these sources, and this is not based on its general knowledge. This is based on these particular documents. It has pulled out every kind of event that happens that is connected to a moment in time, and it's created this detailed timeline that zooms in on the you know period of time where there are the most events. So the late 60s is really long. And then it kind of zooms back out for the early 70s because that's covered less in the material. Then there's a cast of characters, so you get to see like basically all the people who are invoked in these sources. So I just ask you, like, think about the amount of time it would take you to generate a document like this from 250,000 words worth of transcripts, right? Like that's 5 books worth of material. So is that 3 weeks to generate a transcript like this? Notebook just did it in 12 seconds. So it gets you to those kind of like different views really fast. Then, of course, there's chat, right? So we'll close the studio panel now. and just show everything here. So we always have these suggested questions that are really helpful, like wherever you are, just in case you're not sure what to start with. So you can always just click on these. We give you 3 suggested questions at any given time. So this is asking a question about how early NASA programs shape current space exploration and policy. So you'll get this kind of like nicely structured answer that will, break out into kind of themes. Often we'll like give you kind of bullet point structure, although we're actually trying to turn down the bullet points slightly, so you may see a little bit less of them. And as I mentioned before, you will always see these citations everywhere. So it says later astronauts like Jim McDivitt made efforts to work with the controllers. So if we hover over that citation, we will see this discussion from Gene Kranz about Jim McDivitt. That's right here, right? And so you can kind of check the factuality of it. But maybe my favorite feature in the whole product actually is you can then click on the citation and boom, it takes you right to that point in the manuscript that it was discussed. So you can read more in the context and understand what else was happening at that point. So the speed with which it is able to like jump directly to the passage from a conversation, like it wouldn't matter whether there was like 30 million words worth of text here or 300,000 words, like it's just as fast. So what that enables is this, I sometimes call it kind of conversational hypertext. So you are basically exploring the material by asking questions, getting these very detailed, sophisticated answers, and then you're able to like follow links directly to points in the original text and read the original text, like that kind of interactive exploration of complex textual material and also because it has image support, visual material that just has never been possible before. It really like is not something we could do just a year and a half ago, and now you can do it just at the speed of thought. It's quite extraordinary, particularly in the research use case. I'll show you. I think this is a good place. Well, I could always just ask a question here, obviously, but I'll show you a couple of questions in other notebooks. So one thing that I do in terms of thinking about how you structure your notebooks, I have a notebook that I call my everything notebook, and I'm just going to switch over to show you that one. So basically, I have been collecting quotes from books that I've read in digital form, basically dating back about 20 years, which used to be really hard. Now it's a lot easier in the age of ebooks to kind of select passages and clip them and so on. So I have a collection of like 8,000 quotes from books that I've read. If you actually highlight things in an e-reader, like the Kindle or the Google Play Books reader, you can easily export all those quotes, and it's pretty easy to bring them into docs and then bring them in your entire collection of quotes into NotebookLM. So I have in this one notebook, I have 8,000 quotes from books that I read over the last 20 years. 20,000 years would be a lot. And I also am slowly collecting, you can see it here, most of the books that I've written as well. So my book Emergence is here, my book Extra Life, my book Farsighted. These are all my quotes. And so there's something like, 4 or 5 million words worth of information in here. And I'm slowly building up the collection of all my books in here so that basically this one notebook is going to have everything I've ever published, at least in book form, and all the important ideas that I've read in book form over the last 2 decades of my life, 2.5 decades, really. So this is really, we sometimes talk about like a second brain. Like this is this kind of like backup version of my brain. And in fact, it's much better than my brain in a bunch of ways because it remembers far more than I could possibly remember of that reading history, even of my writing history. There's a lot of stuff that I've forgotten now. It's what happens when you write 14 books. So this is where I go to kind of think about kind of early stage thoughts. When I don't quite, it's just like the beginning of an idea. I'm thinking about writing an essay or thinking about writing a book or thinking about writing something. And I just want to kind of like brainstorm a little bit. And so I'll just show you an example of the kind of thing that I could do here. So I would say something like thinking of writing a piece about the connection between deep learning and dopamine. Give me an overview of interesting ideas here that might connect to that project. mention which authors and books are most relevant. Now, just to be clear, I could probably just have written connection between deep learning and dopamine, and I would get a very similar result to what we're about to get here. But I do like to kind of spell it out, particularly like mention the authors and things like that. So it's going to go through that whole history, and it's going to create this kind of like lovely. I mean, this is very high level like knowledge work here that it's doing, right? It's like scour through 4 million words worth of text and notes and organize like interesting connections and ideas here. And so it talks about dopamine and the novelty bonus, dopamine's role in working memory, associative theory of the creative process, mind wandering and deep learning, reward functions. And it mentions the authors in here because the authors are mentioned cited in all the quotes that I have. So it knows, who these people are. It might mention me there. Yeah, Wonderland by Stephen Johnson. I'll show you another notebook where I actually identify myself. So here it doesn't actually know that I'm Stephen Johnson. So it just thinks I'm another author who's disproportionately represented in this notebook. So I'm able to just kind of, then you ask a question, and of course it has a conversation history here. So I can also say like, tell me more about the associative theory. So I can kind of ask follow-up questions and just go on these exploratory navigations. So it kind of zooms in on the associative theory, gives me this kind of overview of it with citations again. So you can kind of explore these things in this conversational mode that's just super powerful. You can also at any point create notes. It is a notebook after all, so you can just add a note here, and then you have a new kind of note space. So this is this thing that we made possible with the 3-panel UI, and it's like this is my favorite mode, where I've got an open note, and I've got my chat here, and I'm just kind of like riffing. I'm writing something down. I ask a question. I quickly copy it back and forth between the notes and the chat, and it's just it's almost like a scratch pad where I can ask questions as well. It's just a very powerful mode. It's just all in one single space, so I'm not like jumping back and forth between a bunch of tabs. You can also always like save an interesting response as a note. So if I click this here, it will create this new note right here. I can open it up. It currently, as of like this week, is not preserving the inline citations properly, but in a couple of weeks we're going to finally turn that on so that when you save a note you'll be able to keep the citations there. Right now they kind of just put these junk numbers in which are useless. These responses right now are view only. We're going to make them editable, but that will come a little bit later. So I have like in my everything notebook, I have I keep a lot of notes in here. Like this is where I kind of do my brainstorming and think. And one other key like kind of power feature is when you create notes, basically like the model doesn't see the notes that you've created. So if you want the model to actually like have a given note that you've written or something you've kind of collected, you have to convert it into a source right now. This is a little bit awkward. We want to improve this, but so you can see down at the bottom, you always have this option of convert this note to a source. And at the top level here, you also have the ability here to convert all notes to your sources. So that creates one long source with all your notes. And I find that to be really helpful to do every now and then, just to like take all the notes you've gathered at various things and just put it into the source panel so that you can then ask questions and get citations based on your notes as well as on the material you've assembled for your sources. But you have to kind of do that by hand right now. We want to make that easier to do, but that's going to take a little bit of time for us to do that. Okay, I want to show you another use case. Be sensitive to time. Okay, I'm going to show you this one here. This is a little bit more of an educator use case. And yeah, okay. So in this notebook, imagine I am a educator who's working on ideas for a class they want to teach. And the idea of the class is that it's a project-based learning class about urban planning based on the work of Jane Jacobs. And so I want Notebook to help me basically, help me think about what should be in this class, but also to like actually create kind of structured documents that I could use as an educator in this class. And so I've brought together a couple of different sources here. A YouTube interview with Jane Jacobs, a bunch of quotes from her classic book, Death and Life of American Cities. But I've also included here a little scan of my handwritten notes that I jotted down for like how the class should be structured. Like session 1 should be this, session 2 should be this, right? So I've just like taken a picture of that, converted it to a PDF, and put it into Notebook as the source as well. It's amazingly good at reading handwriting. It's totally crazy. So I put all this in here, and what I want Notebook to do is to like help me draft this lesson plan, and I want it to kind of synthesize the Jacobs information and my handwritten notes and create a draft. So I've written this prompt: create a detailed project-based learning lesson plan for a 4-part class on urban planning inspired by the work of Jane Jacobs. Use my outline for the structure of the class. I often find when I do this, I don't even need to say that thing about the outline. It sees my outline and it knows that's what I'm thinking. And so it will automatically do that. But, sometimes it's good to spell it out. So it's going to basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm using sources in different ways here. So there's a source of truth and factuality in a sense, or inspiration in the Jane Jacobs material. And then there's a like structure form in my notes, like take the content from the Jacobs stuff, but follow the structure in my handwritten notes. And you can see it creates this like lovely overview. It matches, see it says session 1, the kind of problem the city is. Session 1, the kind of problem the city is. Like it does this like every time. It creates a bunch of activities and so on. It follows it really beautifully. And then I have a draft, right? I can get started. Like it's probably not the perfect outline, but it's like you get around the blank page problem, right? And you actually have something to edit rather than something that you have to like write entirely from scratch. And if sometimes I would bring this into a note and work on it in a note, I could also copy this way and bring it into Docs or another word processor if I want to edit it somewhere else. When you copy using that tool, it drops out all the citations, so you don't have any kind of like junk citations when you paste it into Docs, because the citations wouldn't be useful inside of Docs. So that's helpful for formatting use. Now this is a really important power user tip here. You can see in this source panel that there are these checkboxes here. And the checkboxes control what sources the model sees at any given time when you ask a question. So if you want to restrict the model's attention to one source, if you really want to zoom in on one source, or if you want to just focus on 2 or 3 sources or something like that, you basically like check these boxes to control the focus for the AI. Currently, this only affects the chat. So everything in the right-hand panel is actually just based on all your sources. We are actively changing that. It's going to change in the next week or two so that you'll be able to like create an audio overview, for instance, based on just 1 source or 2 sources, depending on what's selected. But this is really helpful in a notebook where you maybe put in like 40 different sources on different things and you want to be able to bounce back and forth between them. So you'll see here that I have unchecked this document. And this is an important document because this is a framework. It's kind of guidelines for a project-based learning class. You can imagine this is like state guidelines or national guidelines for how high-quality project-based learning classes should be structured. So this is another kind of source use, right? I'm not just looking for facts in this source. I'm looking for like instructions or regulations or something like that, right? Like these are the things that the thing I'm trying to create has to comply with in order for me to be successful at my work. And so now I've turned on this framework document and I can say like, suggest edits to the lesson plan to make it more compatible with the framework for HQPBL learning. So now it's going to, because it now has access to that, it's going to go through the document it just created. It's going to like analyze it and come back with a set of like specific recommendations. So it says, to align the urban planning lesson plan more closely with the framework, consider these edits, keeping in mind the 6 criteria of the framework: intellectual challenge, blah, blah, blah. And it goes through and creates this like detailed plan for editing this document and changing around to make sure that it's compliant or aligned with those standards. Again, like super high level form of knowledge work here. And the point I'm making here is not only that you can kind of turn sources on and off to focus the model on them, but you should really think about sources as things that you can use in different ways. So those are kind of like three examples. Like you could upload a template of the document that you're trying to create and be like, okay, it should follow this structure. So you could say follow the structure of source X, but create a new document based on the content of source Y. And as long as you spell that out in the prompt, it will do that as well. So it's really it's just it's a super powerful tool. I'm not even getting into. We do have sharing features, which if people want to talk about, we can talk about. But I want to make sure that we have a good amount of time for questions. So why don't we switch over to that, and I will switch back over to the chat, and I should okay. I'm gonna go to the highest. I'm gonna go to the most popular questions. Okay. Hopefully I'll be able to answer this. So Stuart Smith asked about Notebook handling privacy and local storage compared to self-hosting solutions like Obsidian. That really varies, I believe. Generally, like we are hosting your data. I believe there is the cloud version of NotebookLM that has just been released, offers different kinds of storage for enterprise customers who want to kind of manage their own document storage. I'm not sure what that is. But as I said, in terms of privacy, like we are never training on your data. And so it may be stored on Google servers, but we're not keeping it or capturing it. And human beings are not looking at your data in any form. So there's a lot of security and privacy there. There's a question about, is it possible to link NotebookLM to Zotero to sync PDFs of articles directly to a particular notebook? I want to say a couple things about PDFs actually, but also about Zotero. So we do not yet have an API of any form. So there are no real direct links between third-party apps and Notebook. We did kind of coordinate with a wonderful service called Readwise that helps you organize clips and quotes from books like the Kindle, where they have a special format for Notebook that basically like exports all your quotes, like I showed, into a Google Doc, which you can then like bring into Notebook very easily. So we have a little bit of an integration there, but basically like there is no kind of official integration with any other products yet. We were just like 7 people until 3 months ago. So it's just been limited in terms of what we've been able to do. We're growing very fast and we want to have more of those. We're definitely discussing an API. But right now there is no kind of way to automatically like sync with any other service. PDFs are actually our most popular source type. And we are not, I have to say, like we are working very hard on improving the PDF experience. But there are a couple limitations to them right now that you should understand. If you have a PDF that has no selectable text in it, if it's just a bunch of images, even if those images are un-OCR'd scans of like old newspaper articles or something like that, so it's text, but it has no selectable text in it, we will take those PDFs and treat them purely as images. And then you can do like quite remarkable things, even if the questions that you're asking are textual based. Like it will understand the text, even though it's just a bunch of pixels. The citations will just be the page rather than the individual quote. You'll just see a little image of the page. But if you have a PDF that is a mix of actual text and images, we currently only grab the text. And so that means in a PDF that has a chart, as of right now, and this is going to change in the next 3 or 4 weeks, but if you have a PDF with a chart or a diagram of some sort, we are actually not seeing that diagram of that chart. And so you can create docs that have text and images, and we will understand, the model will understand the images as well as the text. But PDFs, we do not yet support images in a PDF unless the PDF is all images. And that's we realize that's a big pain point. A lot of people, particularly in scholarly context, are using PDFs. We also, unless it's all images, we don't show the fully rendered original PDF in the source viewer. We know that people want to be able to do that. It looks a little jumbled and broken up when we show it. So you can expect to see PDF support improve a lot over the next month or two, but those are the limitations right now. Okay. Important question. When can we get an Aussie accent in the podcast? That probably will be a while. We are definitely working on other languages. It's English only right now. The reason why it's so hard to do other languages is this is not a product. The reason it sounds so believable and why it's been such a big hit is that we have a very cutting edge audio model that is trained on two people in conversation. So it's not like you train one voice and then you have a script and you send it to one model and then the other voice is voiced by another model and they just talk to each other. This is a full conversational model. And interestingly, it turns out that the two human beings that we used for this product, they just had a really great chemistry in the many hours of accumulating training data. And we actually have some other English speakers that could be alternate voices, and they just don't have the same magic. So they say, if you've listened to this first pair, multiple times, and you listen to these other ones, they sound kind of flat in this way. And so we've deliberately not used these yet because they just don't seem to have the quality. And so we need to have all languages have different ways, not just of speaking solo, but also of speaking in dialogue. And so you have to capture that right. And so we are actively working on a number of other languages, but I believe an Aussie accent is sadly not one of them yet, but someday. Okay. Question about universities. Some Australian universities are allowing Copilot to be used by staff, but discouraging other models and banning DeepSeek. Is it likely the privacy security policies of NotebookLM would be, I assume, compatible with university policies to allow NotebookLM as a research tool? We certainly think so. I think that everything that I talked about in terms of source grounding has been our and the lack of training on the information that's uploaded. That it's all very much in that spirit, right? We wanted this from the beginning to be a responsible deployment of AI, where people could feel like it was trustworthy, it was attentive to the original provenance of ideas and information, so that if the model says something interesting to you, you can easily determine where that information came from, and also that it was private and secure and not training on the information that was uploaded. So we believe that we've built the most responsible deployment of AI in the context of a kind of a research domain and education domain. So if you are finding that your university is not allowing people to use it, it is now I believe it's called a core service and workspace. So it has to be actively turned off by administrators for it to not be available. And so please reach out to Google Workspace representatives in your country.
And Steve, it's probably worth mentioning, we don't have anyone from the cloud team on the call, but it's probably worth mentioning that there's an enterprise version of NotebookLM, which Google Cloud offers, which deals with all these issues, local storage, customized enterprise privacy controls, and that kind of thing. So if your institution has concerns, reach out to your local cloud team, enterprise workspace team, and they can help you find a path forward.
Yeah, there's been a lot of really amazing work done on that front in the last 4 months, which I have had nothing to do with because they know not to bother me with this stuff because I'm just a writer guy who got brought into this project. So yes, please do explore that. Okay. Moving on to further questions. Is this session being recorded?
Yes, I can take that one. Yes, it is. It'll be available via the GDG AI for Science website. The recording normally takes a day. It'll be up in a day or so.
Okay, there was another question about accents and it is, so one thing about the audio, it is much easier to do different languages and different accents if it's just in solo mode, not in conversation mode. And we think that there are some audio formats that could be really good where it's just a single speaker. And so, and the advantage of those are we can make them, accessible to a bigger part of the world's population. So we are actively developing those. So we will have a lot more options in terms of languages and accents coming soon for non-conversational audio. But those formats could be really like creative. I mean, the podcast is really is so unique, but like we can do clever things as well with like single speaker audio. Just to like think of an engaging lecture, for instance, with that same like human feeling. It's just one voice instead of two voices. So that is definitely in the works. Okay, have you compared and contrasted the thematic analysis of source documents with gold standard qualitative research methods? Does the LLM provide output that a qual researcher would respect? Yeah, I mean, we have a growing quality team dedicated, many people now. In the early days, I was the quality team when we were just a experimental prototype and had 3 engineers. So there was a lot of me, like, I did a lot of evals where I would upload one of my books and we would generate these kind of summaries and things like that. And it turned out to be surprisingly like super useful to have an author on the team, because an author, if you can put up a 100,000 word book and ask questions or ask for a briefing doc or a FAQ, like the author can tell very quickly when the model is like bluffing and where the model is eliding things or missing big things. So that was our initial defense, a year and a half ago. But we've grown up a lot, and yeah, we do quality evals for everything that we introduce now. So I think that you will find that in general, we want to make these the draft formats like briefing doc and FAQ. Study guide is another one you can see on the screen there. That's really useful for students. We want to make those customizable as well. That's something that's actively in the works. And and we want them to be editable. And so, what may often end up happening is, you do a first pass of it and you're like, okay, that wasn't perfect. I'd like you to emphasize a bit more this other thing. And, and you can kind of steer it towards the output that you want. But these models, Gemini is really, it is extremely good at summarization and also at extracting like interesting facts. Like one of my go-to questions is just like, what are the most interesting things in this new document? And its ability to kind of sense interestingness is quite extraordinary. Like we were never able to search for that kind of property before, and now it's something that you can do and get a great result in like 5 seconds. So it's super powerful. Okay. Yes, one of the features it feels like an obvious omission is the ability to export a note or summary to an external doc. Is there a reason for this? Great question. I can tell you that every single mock we have created for releases dating back to December of 2023 has included a send to docs chip at the bottom of notes. And we just honestly, like, there's no reason why we haven't done it. We want to do it. Docs wants us to do it. We just have been overloaded with other things we had to build. So I am very confident we will finally add that in 2025. You can obviously copy and paste. It's not that much harder, but yes, we would like to make it very easy to like go back and forth between docs. It's part of it is we think about like Notebook is a place where like you do the early stage ideation, you sketch out some ideas, and then when it starts getting to a more fully fledged stage where you might want to like write the final version of it, boom, that's when you go to docs and you do that. So making it easy to like export from that would be a very logical thing to do. The other thing that I don't know if a question is going to come about this, but I would think this community would be interested in this, which is, we currently the number of features in Notebook that allow you to discover new sources from within the product is exactly 0. Like there's no way to like find something on a topic, right? So you have to bring your sources to the product, and then you're off to the races. But it turns out we work for this company called Google, which is very good at like finding stuff on the internet. And so we really want to, I think some of you may have seen the fantastic deep research product that like we rolled out in December that the Gemini team did. That's just amazing. And a lot of people discussing it thought that deep research and Notebook were a match made in heaven. We agree. So you should see some source discovery tools so that you can be inside your notebook and find things that might be relevant and populate your notebook with sources without ever leaving the app. That is very much actively in development right now. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, this is a great question. So given that only imported materials are considered, what is NotebookLM's ability to identify gaps in the argument or areas where more info research is required for the user to import? It's a very good question. So you can understand where this is a complex one when you think about source grounding, right? Like on the one hand, we've built this product to like stick to the facts and the sources, right? That is its calling card. That's one of its key abilities. Gemini is extremely good at that as a model. I would argue the best at source grounding of any of the big models. But obviously on some level, like the model has to have outside understanding of the world as well. Like it can't be like, I can't answer this question about hospitals because you never defined the word hospital. I don't know what a hospital is, right? It knows what a hospital is from its training data. And so it can talk confidently about hospitals if there's some reference to hospitals in your, so it's always using its background knowledge on some level. And so being able to figure out how exactly you restrict it and focus it is tricky, and it's not exactly a hard science in a way. So I think you would find if you gave it some sources and then said, what are the holes? What's missing? What else could I explore here? That you would probably get good results. I bet your mileage will vary depending just on the sources and the context, but that's certainly a skill that we would like the model to have. But it is tricky to be as focused on source grounding as we are to always make that work. All right, I think we're pretty much at time. So thank you all. Great questions.
I'll just quickly check. Pablo, are there any questions in the room live at ANU?
Any questions? No, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
All good.
Very interesting.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was fantastic. I'm very conscious that there's so many questions that went unanswered. We unfortunately just don't have time. But what I will try and do is capture the questions that we didn't get to. And when we post the recording on the GDG site, I'll see if we can include a doc that has some answers to some of the other questions. Yeah, I think that's probably the only way that we'll be able to get back to everyone. But yeah, thank you very much again, Steve, and thank you everyone else for your time today.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.